So, the new Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared TV show on Channel 4 has just come out, and it is very interesting. If you somehow haven't heard of this series thus far, I'd recommend going and watching at least the original web series right now. There's a link in the description. I can't say I was in the middle of the hype when the original series came out on YouTube. In no small part because they would have given baby me actual night terrors if I'd watched them at the age I was when they released, I imagine. But in between Don't Hug Me's OG finale and the mysterious Wakey Wakey teaser, I watched the original run with a group of friends. Ironically, the one that showed it to us all thought the original was the only video and was shocked to discover there were 5 more. Good times, good times. All that to say, while I've not been around this fandom as long as many in it, I'm certainly not new to it.
Wait, I did my waiting! 12 years of it!
While I'm not going to go into the original series in any depth, not today, I'll still use it now and again for comparison's sake to the new one, because oh boy, does the new TV show contain a whole lot more of what we're talking about today. Horror. How do you properly describe horror? Beyond that, how do you make it in a show or movie or game?
That's a tricky one.
Google describes it as an intense feeling of fear, shock and disgust. Oh yeah, that definitely describes the feeling of watching DHMIS. It also seems to describe me, but we're just going to cross over that for now. Horror's subjective. Some people prefer horror that's trying to elicit a deep and complex psychological reaction. And some, like myself, are thoroughly entertained putting on everything from Jason X to House Shark. Bad horrors are amazing, fight me. But there's one kind of horror subgenre that's been climbing the ranks for me lately. And it doesn't even have to be in something specifically labelled horror. Hell, I'd argue a notable example of this would be The Matrix. And, to the surprise of absolutely no one, you've seen the title, that would be existentialism. This is a trickier one to pin down, but considering it's the whole theme of the video, I can't just ignore it if it's something I might not be sure of. Existential horror is, to me, a piece of media that makes the characters and or viewer question their very existence. Like I mentioned earlier, The Matrix being a perfect example of such. It's really the first big mainstream media to propose the question, do we all live in a simulation? Would we know? Even after we've quote unquote escaped, is there any way to know we're still not in that simulation? Etc. Don't Hug Me doesn't propose any specific questions like this, at least when it comes to existentialism. But in a way, that makes it almost scarier to me. The world is just as horrifying and unknown to us, the viewer, as it is to the characters, and nobody has a real grasp on what is going on. Maybe. Okay, first things first. Let's go through this funny little puppet show focusing on what I'm talking about in terms of this existentialism. A whole 2/3 of the show, episode 1, 2, 3 and 4, on their own, don't contain that much of what I'm talking about. Don't get me wrong, what they do contain is a gargantuan amount of creativity, bizarro horror, catchy songs, and the standout that I don't think anyone expected from this new batch, some real impeccable comedy. I can't deny I did have the slight bit of disappointment that the episode centred around death probably ended up being the lightest or second lightest in tone. But I can overlook that because, good god, the creators know how to use the weird ass modern age of humour to their advantage. Looks like the original shorts were ahead of their time. Then we get to episode 5 and 6. Good god, episodes 5 and 6. Definitely my favourites across the whole series, and easily the most stomach-churning dread I've felt in the new group of episodes. And it's not because there's the most violent gore or a wide array of jump scares here. Now, episode 5 starts off a bit differently. See, at the beginning every time, our characters are wanting something. Whether it's as simple as something to do, starting up a computer, or opening a bag of chuddle dollops, in comparison to the original episodes when they were just kind of there. Episode 5 has Red Guy bored. Not just bored, frustrated. Frustrated of everything, every day being the exact same, and you know what, I'll just let him... Yeah.
Go somewhere different. I want to get out of this place.
Well, that's not allowed.
I mean, all we do is sit around and then some guy comes and tells us about banks or vegetables or something.
What on earth are you talking about?
I mean, don't you want to see something else, something different?
We can already tell that something's not quite right. The characters shouldn't question the fact that their world is episodic, that's just how it is. And yet, he's starting to realise it's not quite right. But that's interrupted by this episode's teacher, an ageing train who's honestly a pretty sad character more than sinister, characterising an elderly person who doesn't quite remember or think right anymore surprisingly well for a felt train, but that's not what we're about here. The train explains they're going on a trip, and Red seems happy about this in a surprisingly natural way. Like, in comparison to the rest of the show's dialogue, his words here seem oddly realistic. You can tell just how much he wants away, and the tension is starting to rise just slightly because you know this won't end well. We go through the teacher's song, even more scatterbrained and nonsensical than usual, but constantly permeated with Red Guy's constant oh so simple questions. Where are they going? How did they get here? What is going on? This isn't just a musical number to them, it's a bizarro alternate reality. And it doesn't make sense because why would it? Red's growing awareness of this and helplessness to do anything at all about it is far scarier than any blood and guts this show can throw at me, but we'll get there in a moment. The song ends with the teacher seemingly dying horrifically of old age, the trio still inside the house. And this is where the mentioned claustrophobia of the show really starts to come into fruition. There's some really excellent voice work here actually. You can tell Red really wants this, but he's asking as nicely as possible, clearly trying to convince both his friends, the only guys he knows. After some very relevant jokes about other drivers, we're off onto those desolate roads with the sat-nav. A character with like 30 seconds of screen time, but also memorable. In part because of that Clay Hill gag, but also because of how she's the first obvious reaction that something's wrong. Her insistence of them going home, everything from her rhetorical asking to type in the destination when she clearly knows they don't really know any of the names of any locations, to her final pleas she's thrown away. It's clear they're going against the script. What they're doing isn't right, and we can only wait and see what the consequences of that will be. After, again, a very real, genuine request from Red to keep going, along with the uncertainty of the others, and a goddamn incredible gag, a musical number, and a cameo from our good old friend Roy, who, well, I'll let the theorists dwell on that, I've got nothing. Duck starts watching our good friends Gralton and Hovris. And, oh, we'll get back to you. You're important later, more than I ever thought you'd be. Red Guy tells Yellow all about what neighbours in a community are, and the previously anti-driving Yellow starts to like the idea more and more. Going into a beautifully nostalgic, clearly passionately made rendition of a toy-like children's animation that you'd see so much of years ago in the UK. This is genuinely one of the most difficult parts to watch in all of DHMIS to me. It does such a good job of setting up this kind, warm environment, and does it so well and for so long and with such care that even on rewatches you start to get sucked in, and then... You know, I can see why so many theories believe this is how Leslie's son died, not because it's the same amazing voice actress as the narrator here, but because this just feels so real and visceral in comparison. It's not someone getting their blood sucked out by an evil tree or being aged to rotting skeletons by a clock. It's someone clearly meant to be a young child getting hit by a car. The additional fact that we don't even see the blood and gore in a series so famous for it really strikes home the horrificness for me, ironically enough. And then, everything starts to fall apart. As per usual for a Don't Hug Me episode, but not like this. The car starts to malfunction, including the screen ducks watching, and we get this little back and forth.
Sit
I'll
tight.
never know if Grolton made his appointment.
Well, obviously he will. He always does.
What do you mean?
Grolton always makes his appointment, and no matter what happens, they start the next episode back at home.
And, oh god, this is what I love about DHMIS's brand of existential horror. We don't know how much Red knows. I don't think he knows how much he knows. He just knows that something's wrong, there's something they need to get away from. That their world might just be as real as the world of Groton and Hovris, and that's scaring him. But not as much as it scares the teacher. The one that are summoned. The one with all the knowledge, and what does he say?
What's going on? What? What the hell are you doing?
There's a faint horror-esque violin in the background, something we almost never get here. The teacher is a mixture of confused and scared. He even swears, to this day, something that none of the others have done. Even if things have gone wrong, they've remained professional, so to speak, continuing their song or exiting stage left. And, oh god, Red Guy. A character defined by his deadpan reactions and lack of care, his only previous shoutings being for comedic effect. Seeing a silly character like that break into a genuine hysterical breakdown, I emphasise again, is scarier to me than any amount of pig organs. And then,
There has to be something, anything.
Guys, there's something out there.
nobody in the Don't Hug Me community really knows what's happening here. Whether their world is truly in an apocalyptic trash heap state, whether it's just this area and they're not long away from genuine civilization, or, well, if it's real at all, we aren't given the answers. And the lack of them, the unknown, makes us so much more scared for our main cast. And upon watching episode 6, knowing that Yellow has seen Leslie before, this becomes far more chilling. This is not a reaction of confusion before he hears a disembodied voice. This is a reaction of recognition, of remembering this voice from before. But of course it's too late. We do not know the rules of this world, and I'm doubtful we ever will. But God, it's compelling. Hi, hello, this is the part where I ask you to do the funny like and subscribe. Please and thank you. Seriously, it helps so much in what I do and how I do it. Thank you so much, okay, bye. And now we get to our finale. Did it one-up the confusing but very dark, very fascinating original series finale? Yes, so much. Now, how do we start our ending beyond a little bit of fun foreshadowing? Yellow. Yellow being his usual weird, illogical, stupid self. Just like he has been for the entire show, played for laughs 9 times out of 10. He's slow and weird, and the two don't really seem to like or respect him that much, at least not as much as each other. And oh god, I can't help but feel awful about that a second time round. Next, a teacher pops up, and we get our usual song and dance, literally. Nothing much to comment on besides one of the best comedic bits of the entire franchise, and then, well, Yellow gets new batteries. And we get to meet the true, proper Yellow. Polite, genuinely smart, and inquisitive. A personality trait that we've never seen before on this show, not even in the original. Red came the closest, yes, but he was either a near silent protagonist, or just wanted to get away. Yellow, he's questioning things, in a way that's not vague or subtle like they've questioned it before. It feels so good to get these kind of questions, especially when he essentially grills a teacher, and at the same time feels so wrong for this world. It starts out as a joke, like, haha, stupid guy now super smart. But the reactions of the characters make this all start feeling weird. Where's this going? Then we get to a scene that I've not seen talked about at all, really. But so genuine, it's heartfelt, and
At least it doesn't hurt to think anymore.
oh, makes you feel way worse for this poor puppet than you should be able to. And he starts to go up the stairs, with paintings to signify that this has happened before. It's interesting to say the least. Ending up in this horrificness. God, it's like Uncanny Valley had a baby with a hyper-realistic cartoon character. Again, the big boys scene isn't talked about, at least in comparison to later scenes, but oh god, I don't like it. The disbelief of Yellow as the mind-numbing, completely wrong song starts to play, the trance-like state of the big boys, and oh god, why does no one talk about this? Maybe it's just me that this image freaks out so much, but I really do not like it. It's Yellow's first proper glimpse at that this reality isn't just wrong, it's fake. It's someone else's. Just imagining what that could even be like. Can you even? Is it possible to? That right there is some great existential horror, and it's with a 2-second glimpse of weird puppeteer guys. I completely resonate with Yellow's face at the end of it. Now the bigger boys' room admittedly leaves something to be desired. It's still worth it, for the payoff of...
Stop it!
It's your problem. This is as good as it gets.
Can't be! There has to be something else. Doesn't there?
as well as...
Oh, why don't you experiment on each other?
So, would you be keen?
You're not to touch me.
But overall, it feels a bit more lackluster and a lot less creepy. But the burning question is finally raised. Is this really all that there is? Is this torment and horror and nonsense for nothing at all? And then we meet the Enigma herself, Leslie. Again, I'm not here to make theories, I'm just here to suckle up that sweet, sweet existential dread. And good God, this character is perfect for the job. Nothing comes out of her mouth but constant half-truths and confusion. I'm still not sure if she's supposed to be a real human or some kind of puppet that's evolved from the Uncanny Valley. But that's kind of the point here. The more you know about the horror and existentialism, the weaker it becomes. And I hate saying that because I adore good answers. There's so much that we don't know about Leslie. In fact, we know basically nothing for sure. But she gives such a good performance, has such fascinating dialogue, and looks so perfect for this world, and yet so far removed from anything we've seen, that of course the fanbase is up in arms about what she means. Now, for a moment we'll go back to Red and Duck, who I, along with the rest of the finale, have been kind of neglecting up till now. They've had some very funny moments, but here, in the void that looks very reminiscent of a previous episode 6 void, they start seeing things. Dead teachers who they're not even sure if they recognise. After all, this is a constant cycle of years and years of so many teachers and gore and death and rebirth. You might start to forget some of your tormentors. And perhaps for the first time in the whole series, Duck sounds genuinely, no comedy, unnerved. Then we have perhaps the single scariest, most overwhelming teacher from the last series. Run past him in a fit of panic, so that's quite lovely. Coupled with the last series mastermind dead under a table along with the rest of them, casual as can be, doesn't raise horrifying questions about the teachers of this world at all. Finally, we say a much too soon goodbye to Leslie. And despite her being everything Yellow Guy and the viewers don't want, that being telling us just to see the funny side and laughing whenever we want real answers by this point, he also wants to stay with her. Because despite everything, she talks somewhat normally. She seems like a real person, not like the two downstairs sometimes. And you can tell he's scared still, for good reason. But at the moment you can tell he just wants to feel safe from this world. But apparently, he doesn't belong up there. And we get that door, that bloody door. It's so horrible, it's so tantalising, it's so perfect. No matter how much we theorise about what we've seen about Leslie, there's always going to be that. Those stairs. We can figure out as much as we want to, but we know there's one thing, that hugely important detail, that we're truly unknowing of. I hate it and I absolutely adore it. Speaking of
What's
which...
happening?
There you are, greedy battery hog.
Yeah, get him.
This scene is almost as difficult to watch as the car crash, but for different reasons. Of course, it's not nearly as realistic, but seeing Yellow's intelligence, nay, his new identity, his emotions, his self-awareness, stripped away for a bit of light and electricity as he pleads and begs them to stop. Ugh. Knowing what happens next is crushing. And then, again, I'm not going to go into theory territory, but we don't really know whether Yellow shredded the Book of Answers because of him reverting back to just being stupid, or because he didn't want to know more about the horror show he was trapped in. I mean, just listen to that laugh. I can definitely see it as him holding back sobs, and I don't know which is worse. And with that laughter, the credits roll, and we go back to desperately waiting for more of this deranged madness. I love existential horror. Especially the stuff that kind of sort of breaks the fourth wall? Question mark? Breaks the third wall, I suppose you could call it. Before, I had the original web series to point to as a great example of this, but the new one has completely blown it out of the water. Do I want there to be a season 2? You know what? Yes. I really do want there to be a second season, not because I want the mysteries of these episodes answered, but because I trust Becky and Joe that if they do continue on with this horrific, weird tale, they'll do it excellently. And with some magnificent horror.